Because Mira loved historic preservation, my daughter-in-law Erin beamed into the microphone. We have good news. We already have a buyer for Dad's duplex. The contract will be signed this week. Glasses clinked off beat. I froze. Sorry, what contract? I haven't signed anything. Liam set a hand on my back like a latch. Dad, the whole family has agreed. You just need to sign. In that moment, I understood. They didn't hear the memorial bell. They only heard money. I slipped the Preservation Society pin into my pocket and walked out under the brick arch. Home to unlock the safe, call the bank, and redraw the boundary with paperwork that speaks. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. I wore the dark suit my wife always liked whenever there was a community event. In the courtyard of the old Preservation Society building, warm yellow lights glowed while the sea breeze pushed salt into the red brick arches. This year's fundraiser carried Mira's name, her last wish, that the old quarter be kept true to the people who built it, not torn down and replaced with something shiny and soulless. People raised their glasses to remember her, telling small stories. The salt and pepper treasurer recalled her smile. The carpenter talked about how she cared for every door, every handle. I stood behind the rows of chairs, fingers on the society's metal pin, whispering, Mira, can you see? They're remembering you the way you hoped. The MC had just finished a few solemn lines, and in that hush where my heart usually slowed, Erin, my daughter-in-law, suddenly stepped onto the terrace. She lifted her glass, smiling far too brightly amid the lingering grief. Because Mother Mira loved historic preservation, her voice carried, we have wonderful news. We already have a buyer for Dad's duplex. The contract will be signed this week. A ripple of murmurs spread. I froze. Sorry, what contract? I heard my own voice go hoarse. I haven't signed anything. My son, Liam, pressed in, placing a hand on my back as if to comfort me. Dad, the whole family already discussed it. It's not convenient for you to live alone. Selling is the sensible choice. You just need to sign. Your mother's legacy, I kept my voice low, is not an excuse for you to decide in my place. Erin smiled stiffly, but didn't step back, placing a business card on the donation table as if staking a claim. It's just paperwork. The funds have already gone into escrow. Everyone wants what's best for you, Dad. I looked at the treasurer's bright eyes filling with tears at that good news and felt a cold line run down my spine. They had prepared this beforehand, and they had prepared it so I would have only one direction to move. As the glasses clinked out of rhythm, I slipped out of the courtyard, pushed the heavy wooden door open into the stone alley. Charleston has its own quiet, the kind a city learns after listening to waves for centuries, and that night the quiet seemed to lean toward me. Back home, I turned the combination on the office safe. Paper old and wood oil smells mixed in the air. The files Mira and I had painstakingly arranged lay in order. A valid short-term rental license with a recent renewal from the Planning Commission, a long-term berth lease at the marina, stamped by period, and the family limited liability company records. The legal shell I created to keep the property out of anyone's whims. The duplex value lived here, papers like nerves feeding a stream of income. Not in brick and tile, but in the right to operate legally in a tightly regulated city. I opened Mira's notebook, her round hand. If anyone says they've saved a spot for us, check with the bank first. I clicked on the desk lamp and reached for the phone. My hands no longer shook. Hello, Doris Hale, Escrow Accounts Harbor & Co. Bank, a steady female voice came after 2 rings. This is Sam Cole. I need to check whether there's any escrow opened regarding the property held by my family company. Keys clacked, then a pause long enough to signal trouble. There is a minimum balance escrow open with the note family has agreed, pending owner's signature. The contact is a broker named Trent Ward. On whose authorization was this account opened? I don't see any valid authorization attached. Please record this call. I, the lawful owner, request an immediate freeze on the escrow until the bank receives my affidavit of ownership and the company's operating agreement. I'll bring the documents in the morning." Doris inhaled, then spoke as if setting bolts. "Recorded. The escrow will be suspended from disbursement. Any further action will require the owner's signature." The next morning, Attorney Avery Blake's office smelled of coffee and new paper. Avery is a man of few words. Each one lands like a brick in a wall. I set the files before him. He read fast, lingered on the old operating agreement, then nodded. "We'll add a disposition clause stating only authorized members may sell, mortgage, or alter use. We'll prepare an affidavit of ownership for filing at the county recorder's office and a cease and desist letter to broker Trent Ward. You can sign before the notary here." The notary's stamp hit with a firm thud that made the room feel sturdier. I sent Doris the updated agreement and the ownership affidavit by email and called back to confirm receipt. Doris replied, concise as ever, "Received, filed, and escrow status updated." I got home while sunlight still lay in long strips on the brick sidewalk. Instead of burrowing into worry, I opened the gate, set chairs on the porch, and texted Mrs. Keegan, my neighbor who works with the Preservation Society, "If you're free, stop by for tea. I want to tell you the house's story." She came, then two more, and by chance, the volunteer lead passed by. I walked them through the hallway, showed the pencil marks Mira once made with the carpenter to keep the old molding line, pointed out the hinge she insisted on restoring rather than replacing, told them about the storm night we sat watching the roof and how Mira said, "Beauty is something that deserves effort, not an accident." They listened and nodded. I didn't need to beg them to take my side. I only needed them to remember why this house stood here. By the time I closed the door, the 4 teacups still warm, I knew the neighborhood understood. This is a place to keep, not a product to toast. That afternoon, Liam came with Aaron. He carried a neat stack of papers, the term sheet as he called it, and set it on the living room table. Aaron stood with folded arms, eyes too bright to be natural. "Dad, sign here," Liam said. "Just a temporary power so we can handle the procedures for you. It's tiring to live alone. We've got this." "You're not a member of the family company," I said, pushing a binder toward him. "This is the updated operating agreement. Only authorized members have disposition rights. I don't authorize you." Aaron arched an eyebrow. "The funds are already in escrow, Dad. The buyer is my friend. They're serious. They've reserved the spot." "It's frozen," I said, calm, "because the bank hasn't seen the owner's signature or authorization." The air grew heavy with a scrape. Liam dragged his chair, its feet screeching a long line across the hardwood. "You're too stubborn, Dad. We'll file for guardianship if we must. You are in a decline, can't you see?" I met my son's eyes. "From now on, every conversation about this property will be recorded. Any coercion will be forwarded to my attorney. Return every spare key. This house is not your storage unit." Aaron barked a brittle laugh. "You're taking this too far. I'm only putting things back where they belong." As soon as they left, an email flashed on my phone. The bank confirmed the escrow suspension and requested all parties attend a conference room meeting the next morning to clarify conditions. I forwarded it to Liam and Aaron with one line. "At the bank. Come if you like." The bank's conference room the next morning smelled of air conditioning and industrial paper. Doris opened the file, voice even. The escrow was opened at a minimum balance without valid authorization from the owner. Transaction terms state clearly, any agreement is contingent on the lawful owner's signature. Trent, the broker, sat ramrod straight, as if swallowing thorns. The buyer, a man in a white shirt and a blue tie, looked back and forth between us. "I was told the family had agreed," he said softly. "I did not agree," I answered, "nor did I authorize anyone to agree for me." Doris recorded each item in the minutes. "In that case, the transaction does not meet the conditions. The escrow will be closed. If the parties wish to proceed, please provide valid owner authorization. Otherwise, the bank will terminate the process." Trent's mouth opened and closed. He glanced at Aaron. Aaron said nothing. The buyer pushed back his chair and stood. Apologies for the inconvenience. I don't purchase anything with unclear title. There was no anger in his voice, only the hurry to step away from a mess. Doris snapped the binder shut. The polite pretenses from the fundraiser night landed, one by one on the cold tile floor. I walked home along the canal, the wind tugging my coat like Mira's hand. I didn't need to outshout anyone. I had what I needed. Minutes. Paper would speak for me in the place I needed it most. The bank, not my living room. That afternoon, I sat at my desk with Maya, my granddaughter. She had quietly taken my side ever since she learned how Mira once walked her through every block of brick, traced each line of trim, and taught her to hear the smell of damp wood. Grandpa, Maya asked, why do adults say for your own good when they're hiding what they want? Because saying for my own good doesn't sound nice, though it's usually closer to the truth, I answered, laying a thin packet before her. This is the addendum I want to sign, naming you manager in waiting of our family company when you qualify. From now on, you'll learn to run short-term rentals by the book and to answer the community's questions. Nothing is free, lawful, and in good faith. Maya held the pen but didn't sign, brushing the barrel as carefully as you'd handle a knife meant to be used with respect. I'll learn. Grandma taught me to start by keeping a door still. The next day we went to Avery's office. He read the addendum, tightened a few words, and I signed before the notary. 2 thin sheets laid a bridge over the gap between me and us. A real family puts responsibility before rights. Then came the settlement. Liam and Aaron arrived late, faces patched together with pride. Avery slid an agreement to the center of the table. Mr. Cole's terms are clear. You will not interfere, represent, open escrow, or contact brokers for any property owned by the family company without written authorization. You will send a written apology for the disruptions. In exchange, Mr. Cole will not file a claim against the broker and will not seek damages for reputational harm, and the bank will release the escrow and transfer a portion to a preservation fund in Maya's name. Aaron blurted, "Why do we have to apologize?" "Because you made a false public statement," Avery said, his voice level, every word exact, and used family agreement to apply social pressure on a man who had just lost his wife, and because you knew the deal was contingent on the owner's signature. Liam looked down at his hands and stayed silent longer than usual. He signed. Aaron signed, the nib carving hard into the first letter as if to punish the page. No applause, no congratulations. Only a fountain pen sliding back into its box, the rustle of a jacket pocket, and the sigh of someone who knows they've stood on the wrong side. In the evening, I walked to the harbor where church bells braided into the waves. Maya walked beside me, hugging a new operations notebook. "Are you angry at my mom?" she asked, meaning Aaron. The woman she knows has more edges than a single graceless night. "I'm angry at the way people turn kinship into a spigot," I said. "But anger doesn't keep a house standing, kiddo. Rules do." Maya nodded. Grandma would be smiling. "She'd say beauty is something that deserves effort," I replied. "And today's effort is keeping the paperwork as straight as the trim." We stopped by the water to read the escrow release receipt. Part of that money would go into the preservation fund bearing her name. I told Maya to hold the paper, not to show off, but to understand that every signature has a cost, apologies included. At nightfall, my duplex, ours, glowed in warm squares of light. I walked the hall and laid my hand on the pencil marks Mira left years ago. The first night after a run of storms, I slept well, not because I had beaten anyone, but because I had kept the way I wanted to live. The next day, I hung a small sign behind the kitchen door, my handwriting with just enough tremble. "This place is open to those who know how to keep a door still." Maya stood behind me and smiled. "Can I change open to open-hearted, Grandpa?" I nodded. What Mira taught us wasn't a list of prohibitions, but a way to open up in the right places. A few weeks later, Maya began her apprenticeship, filing taxes on time, renewing the short-term rental license, checking smoke alarms, answering the Preservation Society's letter about replacing the back roof tiles. Whenever she was tempted to be lax, I told her to reread the first 5 lines of the license. This license may be revoked for violations of city regulations. The law is not a raincoat to borrow when the sky bursts. It's the frame you stand in daily so you don't turn into someone else. One night Liam called. His voice had lost the command in it. Dad, I messed up. I thought practical meant fast. I didn't notice your silence. I said nothing, letting him hear the waves tapping the stone jetty through the phone. If you need to relearn how to speak to family, I said at last, the gate is here. Just don't bring a broker. On the other end, Liam gave a crooked laugh. Okay. Aaron sent a brief email after that. No flourish. I apologize for my false statement at the memorial. I did not respect you or Mira. I replied, thank you for writing. From here on, everything goes in writing. When the south wind came, Maya and I repainted the stair rail. She told me about the volunteer meeting where she presented a responsible visiting plan so guests would understand they were stepping into a story, not onto a backdrop. I told them heritage stays alive if the living are willing to learn its language, Maya said, snapping the paint cans shut. The language of brick, the language of law, the language of neighbors. I looked at the girl and saw in her eyes the same sparkle as the day Mira placed my hand on a door she'd sanded through 7 sheets, the quiet joy of having the right work to do. We added a new section to the operations manual, putting community dialogue before revenue. That night, the church bells stretched long in the air. I opened Mira's notebook to the last blank page and wrote, Love, the kids are slow to learn, but they're learning right. Rest easy. They'll know beauty is something that deserves effort. I'm keeping the house the way you wanted, using papers to speak truth, silence to return falsehood, and these hands to repair what's broken. I turned off the hall light and opened the living room window to let the sea inside. The duplex breathed evenly. On the other side of the wall in that room, Mira once told me, don't teach them with fear, teach with boundaries. I didn't fully understand then. Turns out it only took one graceless night of good news for me to understand completely. The next morning, Maya laid 2 small admission tickets from the Preservation Society on the table. I got us a stroll through the old quarter this weekend, she said. Not to celebrate, but to remember. I nodded and took them, and felt in those tickets not paper, but an invitation to live with a city by becoming a responsible part of it. Out on the porch, the wind ran along the clothesline, puffing the dish towel like a little boat. I heard the waves, and very softly I heard Mira laugh. Not the laugh of a noisy night, but the laugh of a house that knows how to stand on its own, without anyone propping it up with polite lies. For me, that's enough. For Maya, it's only the beginning. And for anyone who ever thought kinship is an excuse to cut corners, I hope they've learned. Procedures aren't there to make life hard. They're there to keep us from straying from what's right. I locked the back door, turned the key slowly, grateful I hadn't signed anything in haste, and grateful to Mira for teaching me to keep one door still before opening another. If you like the story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts on this story in the comments. To hear the next story, click on the box on the left.